And good morning, everybody. Good morning, Newton Falls. My name's Dave Lynch. I'm the city manager here in Newton Falls, Ohio. And this is our regular coronavirus morning briefing. We do this almost every morning, although we are counting down the days because beginning next week, the morning briefing will occur only on Tuesdays and Fridays. It will not be every day of the week. And that's because things are beginning to open up. We are reaching the point where we are getting a little bit closer to normalcy. Now, real normalcy is something that's probably quite a long way away. In Newton Falls, we're disappointed that our most iconic event and series of events is surrounding July 4th. And this year we don't have the car show. We learned yesterday we either don't have the bike show or it's delayed. We don't have the fireworks. We don't have the parade. But inside our spirits, of course, we mark these days and we'll celebrate them in our hearts. And I'm sure that we'll use social media or other methodologies to make sure that we commemorate these things. But the outward things that we like to do have been cut back significantly. This morning, we're going to go off script a little bit from just talking about the COVID-19, as the governor has done in his press conferences, because facts frequently demand attention. And over the last several days in our country, there's been quite a bit of strife over the killing of George Floyd that took place over in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and that sparked a series of expressions of outrage throughout our country. That's resulted in a lot of destruction of property and even injury and death. So this is a very stressful time for the American society. And I thought it would make sense to reach out to someone who could talk to us from a religious perspective, somebody on a local basis. That's why I'm so pleased that the interim pastor over at the Church of God, Jennifer Dorn, has consented to come in our program and address these things just a little bit. Good morning, Pastor. How are you? Yeah, I'm not quite picking you up.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you as well.
Yeah, there's something going on with your phone that we were having some problem with just a little bit ago. Pastor, why don't you do this? Why don't you hang up and I'll dial you up again, all right?
Okay.
Let's do that. Okay, folks, we're going to try something here. And I've got a feeling this device is not producing any more. Folks, you're watching live television. This is the way it goes sometimes. I think something's happened with this device. And let's see what we can do here. Okay, we'll try it again. Could be that the phone is not synced up, so we're going to try this again and see what happens here. Yes, folks, live television, back in the 50s, this is the way it is not syncing up is what is happening with the device. So we're going to do something else. I have an alternative method here that we're going to go to in a second. Are you there, Pastor? Hello? Okay, I want you to speak real loud and clear because we're using a little bit different technique this morning, okay?
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Pastor, we've gone through a lot of strife in this country. We continue to do so. What are you telling your congregation?
Honestly, I think to put it in a couple of simple words, I say that God does not see in color. And I just keep reminding everyone of Jesus' own words that, first of all, he tells us simply, that our number one commandment is that we're to love God with all our heart, soul, and mind. But then he puts right up against that one that we are to love our neighbors as ourselves. And that, is something that especially through these times, we need to remember that, God says that everyone he sees is equal. And we are to love them as we would love ourselves, treat them as we would treat ourselves. And then as I look around at all the rioting and so many voices to be heard, And in the book of James, it talks about that we're to be slow to speak, quick to listen, and slow to anger. And, those are just principles that if we live by those, and if many of us would live by those, how much better this would be.
Yeah. Obviously, so much outrage, anger at what happened to George Floyd. What do you say to those people that say, I am so angry that I can't process what happened in a way that allows me to express my anger in a constructive way. So don't blame me if I break windows and engage in destruction of property. I've seen some voices, especially at some of the national media centers, saying that sort of thing. What do you say to them?
Honestly, it's one of those scenarios where until we've walked in their shoes, how can we truly understand how they feel or why they react the way that they do? And I think it's easy to stand back and point a finger and judge, but yet I've talked to many that I can't even fathom what it is to walk in their shoes and to feel what they're feeling. And so I would be, again, quick to say, what, let's listen. Let's slow down, not have so many opinions right off the bat, and let's try to understand where they're coming from and why they feel the way that they do. So, again, slow to speak, quick to listen.
Slow to speak, quick to listen. Well, let me present a sort of a contrasting perspective for a minute, and that is this. We have to try to understand what it means to walk in somebody else's shoes, but the looting part of it, it seems to me, that's not an expression of anger. I don't know what that's an expression of, but when you see a man who owns a barber shop have all his equipment, including the chairs in his barber shop, stolen out of his barber shop when he is a local participant, investor in that community, even those of us that are most spiritually connected to the scriptures, we have a hard time, sitting back and saying, well, that's okay because I don't, I'll try to understand it because I haven't walked in your shoes before. I imagine that we do get to draw a line somewhere.
Yes, and I agree. I think that, in any of these situations, there are those who join alongside of maybe those who have that heart, to do something good and express their feelings. And then there are others who are just bent on destruction. And that is a shame. I know that is hard to control that anger rising up and getting frustrated. And I do think that in those cases, when somebody is just, it seems completely counterproductive to their part by, coming out and doing, awful things as well. Justice has to be served in those situations as well. And my heart goes out to all of those who've dealt with, the looting and the destruction, especially in such a time where, many businesses and places were finally able to open after such a long time. And now here we are again. My heart just breaks for that. And definitely there are two sides of that because, with all of the many good protesters that are out there, there are those that jump on and make it something it should have never been.
Right. I would imagine from a pastoral perspective, and you recently got the chance to reconvene your congregation for the first time this past weekend. I would imagine that it's difficult to preach when so many of these events are just so confounding. What do you say to people when events are taking place in which coming up with a viable explanation is almost impossible?
Yeah, we've actually been doing a study because of the many things with the COVID, and then, these things relate as well, of the book of Nehemiah, and where people were just dispersed and they were spread about, and we're trying to come back together and rebuild and find hope and, and they were met with difficulties, and they were met with those who came and rose against them and tried to discourage them and tear them back down. And so I've just been trying to give my people from the Word of God a hope that, we can come back together. And I know it's hard, and I know there are things that constantly seem to be coming at us, but we've got to remain strong in the faith and realize that as a people of God, God is not done with his work.
Yeah,
He's not done yet, and he still has a plan and purpose for us.
There you go, the plan and the purpose. Yeah, I've frequently heard there's a particular pastor that I follow on regular media, and what he says, when we see these things that defy explanation, such as these terrible things happen in our country, or you've encountered, I'm sure, when there's a senseless death of a child, it's kind of like having a gigantic novel, and one paragraph from one page in that novel is cut out of that novel, and somebody's walking along the street and they find a little piece of paper with one paragraph from that novel, and the paragraph talks about some terrible event happening, and the person who picks it up says, boy, whoever wrote this must be pretty terrible. But unless you see the big picture, God's plan, we don't know what God's providence really is intending in the big picture. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Yes, that's a very fair way. And that's what I try to encourage my church is that, listen, when these people were walking, that we look at in Scripture, when they were walking through this, struggle and through this journey of life, they don't have the full book like we do. All they could see was what they were feeling in the moment. And, in that moment, it seemed very dark and heavy and impossible. And yet we've got the rest of the story to see where God came through. And we don't have that yet for our lives. We don't have that yet for these situations. Yeah. And so we just have to move on, trusting that God, has a plan and a purpose and can still work through these things. What man has purposed for evil, that God can still work good.
Yeah, that's right. I try to remind people that good triumphs over evil. We have the faith of the resurrection, and that means that as long as we understand the way the story ends, according to God's plan, we don't have the details of every line and every chapter in this gigantic plan of the universe, which, by the way, transcends our own ability to understand intelligently. I mean, the intelligence of God is so far beyond our own that it's we better not let our pride get in the way and think that we can be as smart as God is. I don't think any of us can do that. Right.
That's correct. Exactly. The Old Testament tells us that God's ways are so much higher than ours, and his thoughts are so much higher. and how can we possibly know it? And that's where faith comes in.
Well, thank you for sprinkling a little bit of calm and compassion on our thoughts this morning. The Church of God is there on Broad Street at I call it the tri-intersection of Broad Street and Ridge Road and Wyndham, a beautiful church. And Pastor, you just reconvened. What was it like, by the way, getting together again after all this sheltering at home and not being able to see your parishioners?
It was really a wonderful time. I mean, of course, we have many that are still not comfortable, and we're encouraging them to please stay home and be safe and do what they can do. And, it's not exactly like what we're used to. I mean, there's no hugging, no handshaking. We're sitting over 3 pews apart, and keeping our distances. And yet all of us are so grateful to be there. And it was wonderful to preach to a room with people instead of a camera. So yeah. It was really great.
Yeah. Well, it's, you are one of the pillar institutions in Newton Falls. In fact, we're so grateful your church hosted the inauguration ceremony for our mayor back on January 1st. And I identified you as the interim pastor because your regular pastors moved on to, not to overuse the word, your pastors moved on to greener pastures. Tell us what happened.
Yes, he has moved to Tennessee. We miss him greatly, but yes, he has.
Yeah, and so now you are serving as the interim pastor, which means you're directing things, and then is it a board of trustees that will soon figure out what the permanent resolution of this is?
We have what we call a search committee, and they are working on that in our church council. Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, here's hoping that we've got a chance for you to stick around Newton Falls, because you've brought a sense of a fresh perspective, a real energy, a religious energy to the community. And I've got to tell you, that's what we need in these times. Preachers that give their congregation pablum aren't energizing people, and you are a real spark plug of religious fervor, and I hope that you can keep it up under any circumstance.
Yes, thank you, and Lord willing, that is what I intend to do.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
All right. Interim pastor at the Church of God, Jennifer Dorn. Peace to you, Pastor, and good health to you and your family. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. You too. It was an honor. Great talking to you.
All right. Thank you so much. That was Pastor Jennifer Dorn from the Church of God in Newton Falls, one of the great religious institutions. And at this point in time, we are going to bring forward another one of our really great institutional leaders, and that's because she runs a business, and we frequently talk to business owners. Marianne Traina from a company that is called Artifacts.
Hello.
Hey, hi Marianne, how are you?
I'm good, David. Good morning.
We're operating under sort of a different technological regime this morning, so bear with us.
Sure.
It's great to have you on the program, because right in the heart of downtown Newton Falls on Broad Street is a great little place called Artifacts. First of all, before I talk about how you're operating under the coronavirus, what is Artifacts?
Artifacts is primarily a custom picture framing business. I also do some artwork on the side. It's a little bit of a well-kept secret.
Yes.
But it is custom picture framing primarily.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because on occasion, the city needs a little bit of an artistic touch for various things, and you've always come to our rescue. But given what's happened with the COVID-19, how have you had to adjust your method of operating?
Quite frankly, very little. I think I was closed down for maybe a week or a week and a half back at the end of March. I first saw this as an opportunity. I always have a backlog of work to get done.
Yes.
And I thought, wow, I can close down here and kind of catch up a little bit. But as soon as I thought that was going to happen, my main distributor and supplier in Pittsburgh closed their doors. No trucks were running. I couldn't get supplies, and nobody really wants to ship big boxes of glass and heavy mat board, so forth. So I was kind of at a standstill. I used up my inventory as much as I could. But and now I think that with a lot of people being home, they're going through their things at home, and now I seem to be busier than ever. So, and I was primarily one person in at a time, so there's been no problem with everybody not distancing. Everybody's one at a time. You stand over there, I'll stand here, and I'm busier than ever, David.
Wow, that's wonderful. And I understand also people can get things set up for you in order to keep the social distancing by appointment. Is that a fair statement?
It is a fair statement. I have had people pull up out front, and I just say, come on in. It's, it's usually just a one-on-one kind of business anyway.
Sure.
So that hasn't changed very much at all.
All right, and the phone number for folks that want to communicate with you and get things set up with you by appointment is 330-872-5278. And you also have a great email address, theartlady5278, which is the last four digits of your phone number, at gmail.com, theartlady5278 at gmail.com. Now, in talking to you and learning a little bit about your business, I get the impression that you sort of have a career that is related to graphic arts to begin with. Is that a fair way of describing you?
Yes, I would say that. Hmm.
So you consider yourself to be an artiste?
I try.
Yes.
I try. I call myself an illustrator rather than an
An
art
illustrator. I like
teacher.
that. So what is
Yeah.
your major form for expression of your art yourself? Are you
Ah,
a charcoal on paper? Are you watercolors? What's your thing?
my thing is pastels quite a
Yes.
bit.
Uh-huh.
I do some pen and ink. I do some pencil, and hopefully when I retire, I'll get into some painting a little more. So that's the plan.
Oh, that's great. Well, maybe we can engage your services for some of these events that, well, I used to say the events we have coming up, but I'll say the events that we have postponed to whenever. We certainly have so many iconic things that normally go on. I'm sure we could use your services to produce a graphic representation. And I will tell you, Marianne, in the world of digital photography, people are used to the realism of capturing images in their most realistic, laser-like quality. But I have found that an artistic representation, even if the artist is trying to create as much realism as possible, something about the artist's rendering of something breathes a lot of soul and spirit into it. Is that would you agree with me on that part of it?
I totally agree with that. Yes, it is. It's a magical thing.
Yeah,
And some people do want total realism, and if you want that to be so totally real, then go take a picture.
yeah.
But when I do my artwork, a little piece of me goes into every piece I do. So that's what you're going to get.
Well, that's outstanding. Well, we will make sure folks realize the art lady herself, that is Marianne Traina, can be found at 330-872-5278 and make that appointment. She's right in downtown Newton Falls, which means, Marianne, you've been sort of integrated into the community. When all these events take place, you're sort of right in the heart of it, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I have a great location.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful. And folks, it's right on Broad Street across from Arby's on Broad Street. So, if you're hungry, get your sandwich. But then, when it comes to preserving things that you want to frame, I have found that it's important to go see somebody like Marianne, because if you don't, those pictures, those family things that signify an important event, maybe a baptismal certificate, something like that, if you don't preserve them in this way, they get lost or shuffled off. It's less likely that someone's going to throw away a beautifully framed baptismal certificate than if it's just a piece of paper in a desk drawer. And people are sort of discovering that, aren't they, Marianne?
Oh, they are, and things have changed a lot over the past few years. The quality of glass, there are so many different kinds of glass. If you've ever seen a picture that has been exposed to the elements and they turn a funny color of blue,
Yeah.
that doesn't need to happen anymore. We have conservation glass and museum glass and acid-free mat board, everything that will preserve that piece for as long as possible. So that's a good thing.
Well, thanks for the good things you do in our community, Marianne, and thanks for coming on the program. And we wish good health to you and your family, and peace, and continued and hopefully further success as we reopen the economy. Thanks a lot, Marianne.
Oh, thank you so much, David. Good health to you as well. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks. That it was Marianne Traina, and she's from a place called Artifacts, and which is a great play on words, because artifacts of your family need to be framed to be properly preserved. And she also has an artistic effect on the way that she does things. And she's surviving during the coronavirus, even though she had problems getting supplies. And now things are opening up and she's busier than ever. So give her a call over at Artifacts. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of another one of our coronavirus morning briefings. Beginning next week, Tuesday and Friday are the only mornings this program will be broadcast. So we've got the Friday broadcast tomorrow and then Saturday, and then we go into this new schedule. So thanks for being a part of it. We'll see you on a less frequent basis as we get into next week. But make sure you stay in prayer. And as I say at the end of each one of these broadcasts, God bless America and God bless the city of Newton Falls.